cold billionaire hated his pregnant wife and drove her away. 5 years later, she returned strong with a reluctant billionaire, a heartbroken young woman carrying his child, a cruel misunderstanding that shatters her world. Driven away and left to fend for herself, Eleanor Braxton disappears without a trace. 5 years later, she returns in a swirl of mystery and strength, accompanied by a child who bears a striking resemblance to the man she once loved. The high-stakes world of business, shadowy betrayals, and a haunting past collide in this whirlwind of a second-chance romance. Brace yourself for a tale of shattered trust, secret schemes, and an enduring love that refuses to be extinguished. This story is about to begin. Eleanor Braxton remembered the day Nicholas Harrington proposed to her as if it were locked in a gilded frame, capturing the perfect moment of joy. They stood on a private yacht in the pristine waters near Santorini, Greece. The sun dipped into the horizon, painting the sky in pink and gold, matching the flush on her cheeks as he knelt on one knee. Nicholas, heir to the Harrington conglomerate, was bold, confident, and heartbreakingly handsome. Eleanor was a scholarship student from an ordinary background, blessed with keen intelligence and a caring heart. Their worlds had collided in graduate school, forging a love that felt both illicit and thrilling. It all happened so fast: dinner at prestigious restaurants, extravagant gifts, shared secrets by candlelight, and a deep emotional bond that seemed unbreakable. Nicholas's mother, the formidable Catherine Harrington, had tried to hide her scorn behind polite smiles, but her subtle animosity was always brewing beneath the surface. To Catherine, Eleanor was a nobody, a girl chasing after her son's immense fortune. Still, Nicholas insisted on forging ahead with the engagement, ignoring his mother's reservations. He believed love could conquer any obstacle. Shortly after their stunning engagement party in Manhattan, hosted at the Harrington penthouse, Eleanor fell ill. The smell of fish or the faintest whiff of coffee nauseated her. It dawned on her that she might be pregnant. A visit to Dr. Holden at the private clinic confirmed the news. She was carrying Nicholas's child. At first, a whirlwind of emotions churned within her: elation, anxiety, and an unshakable sense of wonder. She found the courage to tell Nicholas one evening during a quiet dinner. He'd just returned from a high-pressure board meeting, tension still etched on his face. But when Eleanor spoke those 3 words, "I am pregnant," his entire demeanor changed. A glimmer of joy lit his eyes. Yet in the days that followed, doubts and anxiety latched onto Nicholas's mind. He had inherited an empire, a life filled with responsibilities, and the Harrington name carried more weight than any mountain. Rumors of her scheming to marry into the family for fortune spread through the upper crust circles like wildfire. While Nicholas never directly accused her, the doubts simmered and slowly eroded their once harmonious relationship. One fateful evening, when Eleanor was barely 3 months pregnant, Catherine confronted her. The elder Harrington stormed into the penthouse, brandishing evidence of supposed betrayal, a set of fabricated love letters from Eleanor to another wealthy businessman, Brad Millington. The letters were obviously forged, but they seemed convincing enough to an already stressed Nicholas. Catherine delivered a single ultimatum: "Leave my son now, or I will ruin you." In a moment that felt like a fever dream, Nicholas confronted Eleanor. Heartbroken, she tried to explain that she had never met Brad Millington, that this was a ploy to sabotage their relationship. But Nicholas, already confused and battered by conflicting loyalties, refused to listen. Accusations flew. Cruel words were exchanged. At the height of his anger, he demanded that she leave. Tears streaming down her face, clutching her small suitcase, Eleanor walked out of the penthouse and disappeared into the night. She had no idea where she would go. She just knew she couldn't stay there, pregnant and unloved. That night, everything Eleanor had known fell apart. She had no family to turn to. Her parents had passed away years ago, leaving her reliant on academic scholarships and part-time work. Pride burned in her chest, mixing with raw heartbreak. Nicholas's betrayal stung like 1,000 needles, but something deeper jabbed at her soul. The knowledge that the child inside her was now fatherless. On a damp street corner, her tears mingled with the drizzle. The glare of city lights reflected the chaos in her heart. She wondered if Nicholas truly believed those false letters. Or was this all Catherine's plan from the start? She cradled her stomach protectively. No matter what, she would protect her baby. She would ensure that the child never felt unloved, even if she had to leave everything behind. And leave everything behind she did. For 3 days, Eleanor lived in a cheap motel room, paying with what little savings she had managed to keep. She blankly stared at the peeling wallpaper, the flickering light bulb overhead, mirroring her own flickering spirit. Pain coursed through her physical, from her pregnancy nausea, and emotional, from the storm of heartbreak. She understood she couldn't remain in New York City. The Harrington name towered over the metropolis like an omnipresent shadow, impossible to avoid. Nicholas might come searching for her, or worse, Catherine might. Each scenario terrified her. She needed a fresh start, somewhere far enough so that she and her unborn child could rebuild a life without fear of being discovered. Eleanor called her old friend from graduate school, Penelope Penny Turner. Penny hailed from a small coastal town in Maine and had always offered a quiet but sturdy shoulder of support. Upon hearing Eleanor's tremulous voice, Penny insisted Eleanor come stay with her. Within hours, Eleanor boarded a bus, her heart pounding with uncertainty and grief, yet buoyed by a sliver of hope that in Maine she could find the solitude she needed. When she arrived, Penny enveloped her in a warm hug. Soft-spoken and gentle, Penny offered no lectures, no prying questions, only unwavering support. She settled Eleanor into the small guest bedroom of her cottage, which overlooked the tranquil harbour. The scent of salt water and pine replaced the suffocating steel and concrete of Manhattan. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor accompanied Penny to her job at the local library. Surrounded by well-worn books and the hushed pages turning, Eleanor found a small measure of peace. She spent her free hours volunteering, reading to kids at story time, helping the elderly learn how to use the internet. Despite Penny's coaxing, she refused to talk about Nicholas. Her pain was still too fresh. During this time, she befriended an elderly woman named Rose McGregor, a retired teacher whose kindly smile reminded her of her late mother. Rose had quietly watched Eleanor's tired eyes and gentle manner. One afternoon, Rose approached with a kind offer. She owned a small bed and breakfast across town and needed help managing online bookings and marketing. She offered Eleanor a job that would pay a modest wage. Needing a fresh start and some independence, Eleanor accepted. This was how she began to carve out a new life. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Nicholas Harrington found no peace. Days turned to weeks, weeks into months, and Eleanor did not return. He had yelled at her to leave, but deep down he had expected her to fight back, to prove her innocence. She simply vanished. While his pride insisted he had done the right thing, a nagging voice in the back of his mind doubted the letters. He'd tried to track her down, but Catherine insisted Eleanor was just a gold digger who'd finally shown her true colors. Conflicted, Nicholas buried himself in work, determined to excel at business expansions from London to Hong Kong. At the same time, Catherine secretly breathed a sigh of relief. In her view, a scandal had been averted. She wanted her son to marry into a prestigious family with equally robust wealth. The Harrington name deserved a bride who would bring alliances and business deals, not scandal and heartbreak. As the months passed, Nicholas's heart remained haunted by questions. On the night of the confrontation, he had observed true pain in Eleanor's eyes. He remembered how excited she had been to share news of her pregnancy. He recalled how her voice trembled with genuine fear when she denied the letters. And at odd times, he found himself sifting through the fragments of his memory, searching for some indication that she might have been telling the truth. But pride and inescapable affliction for someone of his standing stopped him from reaching out further. He told himself it was better this way, that she had likely used him for money. He forced himself to believe it, even if not entirely. Meanwhile, in Maine, Eleanor began to rebuild. She endured the ups and downs of pregnancy mostly alone, until Penny took her to the local doctor. There, they confirmed that the baby was growing healthy. Despite the heartbreak, an ember of gratitude glowed inside her. She had her baby, and she would pour all her love into the life that was forming within her. When her daughter, whom she later named Violet, came into the world, Eleanor counted 10 tiny fingers and 10 tiny toes, tears of wonder soaking her cheeks. She vowed to be everything for Violet, mother, friend, and protector. Still, nights were often restless. She would gaze at Violet's face, which bore an uncanny resemblance to Nicholas, and wonder if Violet would one day ask about her father. And if that day came, could Eleanor ever find it in herself to explain? 5 years raced by, seemingly in the blink of an eye. Violet grew from a swaddled infant into a bright-eyed little girl who loved listening to bedtime stories. She had a persistent curiosity and a compassionate nature, a blend of Eleanor's kindness and Nicholas's spark. For Eleanor, life in the quaint seaside town had settled into a kind of gentle routine. She worked diligently at Rose McGregor's bed and breakfast, where her knack for marketing and administration brought in more customers each season. She also helped Rose modernize the B&B's website, offering special romantic getaway packages, writing blog posts about local festivals, and uploading scenic photographs. As business flourished, so did Eleanor's confidence. Penny remained her closest friend, offering guidance and babysitting whenever necessary. Despite being a single mother, Eleanor managed to thrive. She saved her earnings diligently and made sure Violet never wanted for anything. Every time Violet squealed in delight upon spotting a seagull or a colorful hermit crab by the shore, Eleanor's heart brimmed with love and a small pang of sadness. She wished Nicholas could see his daughter's wonder, but she quickly tamped down the thought. For 5 long years, Nicholas had neither called nor written, nor even tried to find them, at least not successfully. She refused to dwell on old wounds, but fate, often mischievous, had other plans. Rose McGregor decided to expand her B&B and recommended that Eleanor attend a hospitality conference in Boston to network with potential investors. Eleanor hesitated at first. The big city conjured memories she had spent years burying. But Rose insisted it would be a golden opportunity for the future. Perhaps it was time to face the world again. After all, she was no longer the timid girl who fled from heartbreak. She was a mother and a businesswoman now. Penny agreed to watch Violet for the 2 weeks Eleanor would be in Boston. Kissing her daughter's forehead and promising to call every night, Eleanor boarded the bus, bracing herself for the swirl of city lights, corporate deals, and the unknown. Upon arriving in Boston, Eleanor's first few days were a mix of excitement and exhaustion. The conference center teemed with ambitious entrepreneurs, established hoteliers, and potential investors. Panel discussions ranged from eco-friendly tourism to leveraging social media to attract global travelers. Amid the bustle, she collected business cards, made new acquaintances, and was pleasantly surprised by how naturally she navigated professional environments. Indeed, the nights of crying over her lost love seemed a lifetime ago. On the 3rd day of the conference, a casual remark from a fellow attendee triggered an unexpected chain of events. She heard someone mention the name Harrington Industries. Her heart clenched. The name was so distinct that she couldn't mistake it for anything else. Still, it wasn't unusual for Harrington Industries to have business interests in real estate and hospitality. Nicholas's father, the late Gregory Harrington, had established one of the largest property development arms in the country. The mention sent a jolt through her entire being. During a coffee break, she overheard two men discussing an upcoming presentation by Harrington Industries. They were apparently seeking joint ventures with boutique hotel owners. Eleanor's heart throbbed with a mixture of panic and curiosity. Was Nicholas going to be there? Would she come face to face with the man who had broken her heart and abandoned their child? By the end of the day, her decision was made. She had to see him. She had to know what he was doing with his life. After all, it had been 5 years. The wounds might still ache, but she was no longer that frightened girl who was cast aside. She was Eleanor Braxton, capable, resilient, and mother to a beautiful daughter. She would face him if she had to. Her chance came sooner than she anticipated. The very next day, Harrington Industries held a private evening reception in one of Boston's most opulent hotels. Rumor had it that Nicholas Harrington himself would attend. As she prepared in front of her hotel mirror, wearing a sleek black cocktail dress Rose had gifted her as a parting present, Eleanor felt a tangle of nerves. She dabbed on subtle makeup, determined to project confidence. It was time for Nicholas Harrington to see the woman she had become. The Harrington Industries reception was a grand affair, complete with crystal chandeliers, live violin music, and a lavish display of floral arrangements. Eleanor arrived alone, clutching her invitation. She had managed to charm a consultant earlier that day into helping her secure a pass. As she entered, she scanned the crowd, heart pounding in her chest. She saw Catherine Harrington first. The older woman glided among the elite guests, sporting an elegant silver gown. Her sharp gaze swept across the room. Eleanor quickly stepped to the side, hoping to avoid detection. A swirl of conflicting emotions pressed at her heart, anger at the woman who had sabotaged her life, and heartbreak at the memory of how easily Nicholas had believed his mother's lies. Just then, the crowd parted near the stage, and Eleanor spotted him, Nicholas Harrington. His tall figure was clad in a tailored navy suit, posture confident, and face every bit as striking as she remembered. His dark hair was shorter than she recalled, and faint lines around his eyes hinted at the stress of his high-powered life. A wave of nostalgia flooded her, followed by an ache so profound it nearly took her breath away. She remembered how those arms felt wrapped around her, the low timbre of his voice when he used to whisper her name. Nicholas was giving a brief speech on Harrington Industries' new hospitality ventures. Even from a distance, she could sense his controlled passion, the authority in his tone. She remembered how once that passion had been directed at loving her with the same fervor. When the audience offered polite applause, he stepped down from the stage, shaking hands with potential investors. She knew it was now or never. Summoning all her courage, Eleanor made her way through the crowd. Each step felt surreal, like walking through water. 5 years of questions, regrets, and anger coursed through her veins. She reminded herself that she was not here to beg for anything. She simply wanted closure. At last, she stood face to face with him. For a moment, he didn't recognize her. Then, realization hit him like a tidal wave. His dark eyes widened, and he froze, any hint of composure draining from his features. "Eleanor," he breathed, as if saying her name confirmed her reality. For a second, everything around them fell away, the chatter of the guests, the clinking of champagne flutes, the graceful strings of the violin. Only the two of them existed in this bubble of unresolved tension. The look on Nicholas's face was an unreadable mixture: shock, curiosity, perhaps the faintest glimmer of guilt. Eleanor drew a slow breath. Her voice emerged steady, betraying none of the whirlwind inside. "Hello, Nicholas." He swallowed, searching her eyes for an explanation he wasn't sure he deserved. "1. I didn't know you were here. It's been 5 years," she finished for him. Her heart hammered. She could sense Catherine Harrington's hawk, like eyes prowling around the room. But for now, she ignored the older woman. "You look well." Nicholas gave a half-chuckle devoid of humor. "I didn't think I'd see you again." His tone trembled with repressed emotion. "Well, life is full of surprises," she replied. Neither knew what to say next. The silence between them crackled with unresolved resentment and unspoken sorrow. At last, Nicholas gestured to a quieter corner near the balcony doors. She followed, her body taut with tension. Beneath the soft glow of ornate wall sconces, he turned to her. "Eleanor, I have so many questions. Are you okay? Where did you go?" She could have answered a dozen ways, but the bitterness of the past 5 years demanded she not make it easy for him. "I'm fine," she said, keeping her arms folded. "I made a life for myself." She didn't mention Violet, at least, not yet. He nodded, swallowing again. He hesitated, as though the words lodged in his throat. "I heard you left the city. I tried to find you." She raised an eyebrow, remembering the lonely days she waited for any gesture, any attempt at contact. "And did you really try, Nicholas? Or did you just let your mother's lies overshadow everything we had?" At that mention, his face twisted, caught between guilt and confusion. "You don't understand." "No," she cut him off. "I do understand. I understand that it was easier for you to believe I was nothing but a gold digger, forging letters to some man I've never even met. You believed your mother. You never gave me a chance to speak." He looked away, his jaw clenched. "I regret how things ended, Eleanor. If I could go back and fix it, I would." She studied him, the father of her child, once her fiancé, now practically a stranger. The urge to tell him about Violet flared, but she couldn't bring herself to do it right here, in the middle of a public event, with so many prying eyes. Besides, it would be a bombshell, and she didn't want an audience for that heartbreak. Before either could say another word, Catherine appeared, her eyes narrowing into slits upon recognizing Eleanor. The older woman's voice brimmed with icy politeness. "Eleanor, dear, what a surprise to see you here." Eleanor stiffened, while Nicholas turned stone-faced. Catherine's presence was a reminder of the heartbreak that had driven them apart. Gathering her composure, Eleanor stepped back. "I was just leaving," she said quietly, turning to Nicholas. "If you truly want to talk, I'll be at the convention center for the rest of the week. But I'm not going to chase you, Nicholas. Not anymore." She walked away with her head held high, leaving a shaken Nicholas and a livid Catherine behind. Eleanor's composure lasted only until she exited the hotel. Once outside, she collapsed onto a nearby bench, her heart thrashing. Memories assaulted her, their engagement, the final argument, his face illuminated by heartbreak and anger. A part of her wanted to run back in there and tell him everything, but she needed time to think. More importantly, Violet came first. She refused to subject her daughter to the Harrington family's manipulations or heartbreak. After the reception, Nicholas found himself in a silent battle with Catherine. The older woman simmered with tension, fearful that Eleanor's reappearance threatened her carefully managed world. "What is she doing here?" Catherine pressed. "Does she still have designs on your fortune?" He stared at his mother. "Mother, please. It's been 5 years. You don't think it's possible we were wrong?" Catherine's cheeks flushed with indignation. "I did what I had to do to protect you. That woman was trouble then, and she's trouble now. If she truly cared, she wouldn't have left without a word." Her posture stiffened, a proud woman of privilege, unaccustomed to being challenged. Nicholas felt the sting of shame creeping up on him. For years, he clung to the narrative that he was the victim of Eleanor's betrayal. But seeing her again, looking dignified and unapologetically strong, shook that story apart. He replayed the memory of the forged letters. A part of him had always doubted their authenticity, but he had shoved those doubts away. Now they blared at him, demanding his attention. Later that night, in his hotel suite, Nicholas found himself unable to sleep. He watched the city lights flicker through the window, wrestling with regrets. He thought about the child they were supposed to have. If Eleanor had truly been pregnant, what became of that baby? A sense of dread twisted his stomach. What if there really was a child out there, his own flesh and blood, existing without him? He had brushed off the possibility years ago, convincing himself that if it had been true, Eleanor would have reached out. But maybe she had been too devastated or too proud to do so. On the other side of the city, Eleanor returned to her own small hotel room, exhausted. She called Penny to check on Violet. Hearing her daughter's cheery voice brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. "Mummy, I caught a firefly," Violet exclaimed. "Aunt Penny said we can keep it in a jar for a little bit." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Eleanor replied, her voice trembling with affection. "Make sure to let it go after you watch it for a while, okay?" "Okay, Mummy. Love you," Violet answered before handing the phone back to Penny. Penny's gentle voice came on the line. "How did it go?" Eleanor closed her eyes. "I saw him. I didn't tell him about Violet. I just didn't know how." Penny's reply was cautious but supportive. "You don't have to rush. Think it through. If he truly wants to reconnect, you can always decide whether you trust him enough with that truth." That night, as Eleanor tried to sleep, she tossed and turned, imagining the possible outcomes. Nicholas had money and power, and if he decided to fight for custody, her safe world could crumble. Yet, a small kernel of longing persisted. Shouldn't Violet know her father? Shouldn't Nicholas see the amazing child they created together? The next day, the conference continued at the bustling convention center. Eleanor walked among the booths, distributing brochures about Rose McGregor's bed and breakfast, collecting contacts, and trying her best not to scan the crowd for Nicholas. Around noon, she spotted a familiar figure, Catherine Harrington, accompanied by a younger woman wearing a crisp business suit and an austere expression. They were engaged in conversation with a man from a travel agency. Carefully, Eleanor slipped away before Catherine could spot her. She found a quiet corner near the terrace, stepping outside to catch her breath. She couldn't risk a confrontation with Catherine in such a public setting. The older woman would likely create a scene or hurl accusations. The last thing Eleanor wanted was a meltdown in front of potential business partners. As she stood there, sipping water and gazing over the city skyline, she heard a soft voice behind her. "Eleanor Braxton?" Startled, she turned to see a woman with warm brown eyes and braided hair standing by the door. She looked vaguely familiar. Then Eleanor remembered this was Anna Zheng, a hospitality consultant who had asked thoughtful questions during one of the morning seminars. "Yes, that's me," Eleanor replied cautiously. Anna approached, offering a polite smile. "I couldn't help but notice you left in a hurry. I've seen you around the conference. You're marketing that charming bed and breakfast in Maine, right?" Eleanor nodded. "That's right. The Harbour Haven B&B. Anna moved closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I also noticed that Catherine Harrington was giving you quite the look earlier. Is everything all right?" The question caught Eleanor off guard. She found herself looking into Anna's sincere eyes, wondering how much to disclose. Something in Anna's gentle demeanor encouraged her to open up, if only just a bit. "Let's just say I have a complicated past with the Harrington family." Anna nodded sympathetically. "I suspected as much. I do some work with Harrington Industries. I'm not a direct employee, more like a consultant, but I've seen how Catherine operates. She's difficult, to put it politely." Eleanor let out a wry laugh. That might be an understatement. Anna leaned against the terrace railing. "It might not be my place, but if you need any help, someone to talk to, or if you'd like to know anything about the Harringtons' current endeavors, I'm here." Unbidden tears pricked at Eleanor's eyes, but she blinked them away. "Thank you," she whispered. "I appreciate the offer. Maybe we could have coffee and chat." Anna's expression softened. "Yes, I'd like that. I think you deserve some clarity on Nicholas Harrington's, well, let's just say his internal conflicts. He's not the villain some make him out to be, but he's certainly made mistakes. Catherine has a tight grip on him, though I've seen him push back at times." Eleanor frowned. She recalled all the moments Nicholas had tried to appease Catherine, to gain her approval. As close as mother and son were, that bond had ultimately driven them apart. She didn't know if Nicholas had changed or if he was still under Catherine's sway, but part of her wanted to find out. They agreed to meet for coffee the following morning, before the day's sessions began. As Eleanor walked away, a flicker of hope burned in her chest. Maybe Anna's insight would help her decide whether she could trust Nicholas with the knowledge of his daughter. Morning came, bright and crisp. Eleanor and Anna sat in a cozy cafe near the convention center, sipping cappuccinos in a corner booth. The hum of early business traffic flowed around them, providing a comforting background noise. "I have to admit," Eleanor began, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly, "I never expected to be discussing the Harrington family with a stranger. I'm not even sure where to start." Anna clasped her hands on the table. "Start where you feel comfortable. I won't judge." Eleanor inhaled deeply. She found herself telling Anna about her whirlwind romance with Nicholas, the engagement, the pregnancy, and the explosive confrontation that drove her away. She spoke in a measured tone, but her voice trembled when she recalled the heartbreak. Anna listened intently, her empathy apparent. When Eleanor finished, she leaned back, her emotions drained. "So that's why I disappeared. I never contacted him again. I was afraid, angry, ashamed, everything at once." Anna exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry you went through that, Eleanor. I knew Catherine was capable of sabotage, but I never realized she'd stoop that low. As for Nicholas, he's changed these past few years." Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. "How so?" Anna placed her cup down. "Don't get me wrong, he's still a workaholic, still tries to please his mother. But there's a sort of sadness in him, like a man who lost something precious. He's more guarded now. He rarely smiles. Sometimes you can sense he regrets something deeply." Eleanor's heart clenched. She remembered a time when Nicholas's laughter was contagious, when his joy in simple moments was genuine. The idea that he was no longer that carefree man both pained and relieved her. "So, he hasn't married? No big society wedding?" Anna shook her head. "He's dated a few socialites, but nothing stuck. Catherine keeps pushing him to settle down with someone from another powerful family. He resists. I think part of him is still waiting." Eleanor fought the urge to cry. A swirl of guilt and longing rose in her, but she forced herself to remain rational. "Thank you for telling me this, Anna. I need some time to figure out what to do." Anna reached across the table, gently placing a hand over Eleanor's. "Whatever you decide, just remember, if you need any help, I'm here. I know it's not my business, but if you want Nicholas to know about your child, there might never be a better opportunity than now. He's right here in Boston, away from Catherine's direct control." Eleanor offered a small smile. "I appreciate it. Truly." They parted ways with a sense of companionship that felt both unexpected and comforting. As Eleanor headed to the convention center, her mind buzzed with questions. Should she tell Nicholas about Violet? If so, how would he react? More importantly, how would her daughter's life be impacted? She passed through the conference halls, barely registering the stands or the vibrant banners overhead. Every conversation seemed distant, every handshake mechanical. Late that afternoon, as she reviewed her schedule, she noticed a note slipped under her hotel room door. It read, "Eleanor, I'd like to talk to you if you're willing. I'll be waiting in the second-floor lounge at the Marriott, across from the convention center at 8 p.m. tonight. Nicholas." Her hands trembled as she read it. Her first instinct was to ignore him, to shield herself from more heartbreak. But something compelled her to go. Perhaps closure. Perhaps the tenuous possibility of rebuilding some sort of relationship, if only for Violet's sake. At exactly 7:50 p.m., she left her room, heart pounding all the way. The second-floor lounge of the Marriott was cozy, furnished with plush chairs, subdued lighting, and soft jazz music playing in the background. Nicholas Harrington stood by the window, a glass of scotch in his hand. He wore a charcoal suit this time, tie loosened, as though he couldn't quite breathe. The tension in his shoulders was evident. When Eleanor entered, he turned to face her. A myriad of emotions flickered across his features: relief, apprehension, longing. They sat down at a small table near the window, city lights twinkling behind them. For a minute, neither spoke. Then Nicholas cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming." She nodded, keeping her expression guarded. "You asked me, so here I am." He paused, as if searching for the right words. He hesitated, raking a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry for everything. For not believing you, for yelling at you, for driving you away." Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. She felt a burning behind her eyes, but refused to let tears fall. "It took you 5 years to say that." He exhaled shakily. "I know. I have no excuse. I was naive. I was manipulated, and I let my pride and mother's influence blind me." A wave of anger surged through her, but she tried to keep it in check. "And you believed I forged those letters? That I would cheat on you with a man I never even met?" Her voice trembled. "You never listened to me." Nicholas winced. "Eleanor, the first regret it every day. I was so overwhelmed running Harrington Industries, dealing with family expectations, uncertain if the pregnancy was real or if," he faltered, seeing her anguish. "I'm not trying to justify it. I was just scared." A sardonic smile twisted her lips. "Scared, so you threw me out." He nodded, genuine remorse etched into his features. "I searched for you, but Mother told me you probably left the country. She said if you were truly pregnant, you would have tried to secure child support or contact me. When you didn't, I told myself it meant the baby never existed, or you had ended the pregnancy." Eleanor's voice wavered with raw emotion. "So that's what you let yourself believe?" "Yes," he whispered, eyes brimming with regret. A tear slid down Eleanor's cheek despite her best efforts to contain it. "Well, Nicholas, I was pregnant. I gave birth to a daughter. Your daughter." His mouth fell open. The color drained from his face as though she had struck him. "A daughter?" Eleanor's throat constricted. She felt vulnerable, exposed. "Yes, Violet is her name. She's 4.5, almost 5. She's the most precious thing in my life. I didn't contact you because I was terrified of your mother's reaction, of your disbelief, of being humiliated again. And I promised myself I'd protect her from all of that." Nicholas shut his eyes, tears forming. He sank back into his chair, both hands gripping the edge of the table. "Oh God, Eleanor, I can't believe I have a daughter." He rubbed his face, as if trying to wake from a nightmare. "What does she look like? Is she healthy? Is she?" Eleanor's voice grew calmer, maternal pride shining through. "She looks like you sometimes, especially around the eyes. She loves stories, she's playful and kind. She's perfectly healthy." His eyes glazed with tears he wouldn't let fall. "I missed her entire life up until now. If I'd known." He trailed off, the weight of regret crushing him. She studied him, her own chest tight with conflicting emotions, anger, grief, a faint flicker of sympathy. That's why I didn't want to see you at first. I've built a life for Violet. I can't let you or anyone else tear it apart. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I understand, he whispered, voice strained, but I want to know her, to be part of her life. If you'll let me. Eleanor swallowed, uncertain. This isn't a decision I can make lightly. She's my whole world, Nicholas, and you can't just walk into her life without a plan. He nodded, desperation flickering in his eyes. I'm not asking you to decide right now. Just, please consider it. I'll do anything, whatever it takes. Let me show you I'm not the same man who hurt you. A tear slipped down her cheek as she stood. I'll think about it, she said, her voice soft. I won't promise anything more than that. Nicholas rose as well, his sorrowful gaze trailing her as she left. In that moment, he realized the magnitude of his mistakes. He had lost 5 years of his daughter's life, and it might take much longer to earn Eleanor's trust again, if it was even possible. Word traveled fast. Within a day, Catherine Harrington somehow learned that Nicholas and Eleanor had met at the Marriott Lounge. Fury ignited in her. Determined to protect her vision of the Harrington legacy, she confronted Nicholas in his hotel suite, voice quivering with anger. How dare you meet with that woman behind my back? She spat, pacing the plush carpet. Don't you remember what she did? Are you so easily fooled again? Nicholas squared his shoulders. Anger of his own simmered beneath the surface. Mother, enough. The letters were fake. You lied to me. You destroyed what I had with Eleanor, and, his voice cracked, and I have a daughter I never knew about because of your manipulations. Catherine's eyes widened at the revelation. A child? Nicholas glared. Yes, a child who's been living without her father because I believed your lies. A flicker of guilt shot across Catherine's face, quickly replaced by self-righteousness. I only did it because I knew she wasn't good enough for you. And now you see, she never bothered to contact you. If she wanted you involved, she would have reached out. Instead, she ran away to God knows where to raise that child alone. What does that tell you about her? Nicholas slammed his hand on the table, uncharacteristic rage fueling him. Stop! You don't get to talk about Eleanor like that anymore. She tried to defend herself, and I refused to listen. She was pregnant and terrified, and you forced her out. Catherine clenched her fists, her pride refusing to yield. I did what any mother would do to protect her son. She's a nobody, Nicholas. She has no family, no background. Do you really think? He cut her off. Enough. I'm done letting you control my life, my happiness. I don't care about pedigrees anymore. I care about my daughter and about making things right with Eleanor. He strode toward the door. If you can't accept that, then you'll have to deal with it alone. Nicholas left a stunned Catherine in his suite, slamming the door behind him. For the first time in his life, he felt a sense of freedom from his mother's stifling control. But he also felt the crushing burden of lost time with his daughter. Meanwhile, Eleanor was in turmoil. After the confession at the lounge, she had half expected Nicholas to appear at her hotel doorstep, demanding to see Violet or threatening legal action. But he didn't. Instead, she received a polite text message. I'm staying in Boston another week. Please let me know if we can talk more. I want to meet Violet, but only if you permit it. The respectful tone both relieved and confused her. She wasn't sure if she was ready to let him into Violet's world yet. What if Nicholas changed his mind or let Catherine sabotage their lives once again? On the other hand, Violet deserved the chance to know her father, especially if Nicholas was genuine about making amends. Eleanor's thoughts whirled, keeping her awake at night. Penny encouraged her to do what was best for Violet, reminding her that the little girl had occasionally asked about her father. At last, Eleanor made a decision. She texted Nicholas, "We need to meet." Tomorrow, 3 p.m. AT, the public garden. It's a neutral space. Nicholas responded within minutes. I'll be there. Thank you. The next day arrived, sun filtering through the canopy of trees in Boston's public garden. Eleanor sat on a bench, scanning the crowd. Nicholas appeared, wearing a simple white shirt and dark slacks, looking far less corporate than usual. He approached cautiously, as if afraid to frighten her away. Eleanor drew a breath. I made my decision, she said softly. I'm going to bring Violet here tomorrow afternoon. She doesn't know you're coming. I'll introduce you as a friend. I want to see how you interact with her before I tell her the truth. Nicholas's eyes brimmed with gratitude. I understand. Thank you. I promise I won't do anything to upset her. They talked a bit more about practicalities, but underlying tension thrummed between them. Nicholas made it clear he wanted to be a part of Violet's life, but he also respected that Eleanor had the final say. By the time they parted ways, he sensed a glimmer of hope, fragile but real. The following afternoon, Eleanor arrived at the public garden with Violet in tow. The little girl's face lit up at the sight of the lagoon and the famous swan boats. Violet was a bundle of excitement, pointing at the ducks and giggling as they waddled by. Nicholas waited under a large willow tree, his heart thundering. When Eleanor approached with a small child at her side, time seemed to slow. He spotted the unmistakable resemblance. Violet's dark hair and inquisitive gaze reminded him of his own childhood photos. He struggled to maintain his composure, forcing himself not to scoop her up in a desperate hug. Eleanor knelt down beside Violet. Sweetheart, this is Mr. Nicholas, a friend of Mommy's from a long time ago. Violet gave a shy smile, hugging a stuffed bunny close to her chest. Hi. Nicholas's eyes misted over. Hi, Violet. It's nice to meet you. You know I love bunnies too. The little girl brightened. Really? Me too. Eleanor watched intently, her heart pounding. She noticed Nicholas's careful, gentle approach, the sincerity in his voice. They strolled through the park together. Violet talked non-stop about the flowers, the ducklings, and her favorite bedtime stories. Nicholas listened with rapt attention, occasionally glancing at Eleanor with an expression of mingled awe and gratitude. When Violet wanted to see the ducklings up close, Eleanor hung back on a nearby bench, letting Nicholas take her by the hand. The sight made her eyes sting with tears. The father-daughter resemblance was undeniable. The way Nicholas bent to Violet's level to listen, the way he held her small hand, everything felt tragically beautiful. Finally, Violet dashed off to examine a butterfly that had landed on a bush, giving Nicholas a rare moment alone with Eleanor. He turned to her, voice thick with emotion. Thank you for letting me meet her. Eleanor folded her arms, tears threatening to spill. She likes you. I can tell. He nodded, glancing at Violet with a soft expression. I don't want to push you or her, but I'd like to stay in touch, come to visit you both, and maybe, someday, tell her who I really am. Eleanor sighed, realizing a lifetime of decisions stretched before her. She deserves to know her father, but I can't let her be hurt by your family. Catherine, he reached for her hand, but stopped himself halfway. I'll handle Catherine. My only priority now is Violet's well-being and your trust. If you'll give me a chance to earn it. She studied him, seeing an earnestness she hadn't witnessed 5 years ago. Perhaps he truly had changed. Perhaps fatherhood would bring out the best in him. We'll take it slowly, she said at last. Over the next few days, Nicholas and Violet spent brief moments together in the city feeding ducks, riding the carousel, sampling ice cream on a sunny afternoon. Eleanor hovered protectively at first, but gradually she saw no trace of the arrogant man who once cast her aside. Nicholas was patient, gentle, and sincerely enthralled by Violet. The little girl glowed under his attention. On the final day of the conference, Nicholas met Eleanor for a quiet dinner. It was the first time they truly talked about the future. He expressed a desire to visit Maine, to see where Violet had grown up. He even asked to meet Penny, the friend who had supported Eleanor through everything. Though hesitant, Eleanor agreed. They spoke about the possibility of Nicholas transferring some of his business responsibilities so he could spend time in Maine. She didn't want him to disrupt Violet's life too drastically, but his resolve to be present was unmistakable. They parted outside the restaurant, an unspoken sense of hope pulsing between them. A few weeks later, Nicholas drove up the Maine coastline to the quaint town that had become Eleanor's refuge. Stepping into the harbour haven B&B, he admired the cosy charm. Rose McGregor offered him a room, giving Eleanor a wry wink when he wasn't looking. That weekend, Nicholas experienced Violet's world, the local library where she loved story time, the small beach where she hunted for seashells, the adorable bedroom Penny had decorated with bright murals. By the end of his visit, Nicholas knew one thing: he had found a part of his heart. He didn't realize he was missing. He wanted to remain in his daughter's life, to be the father he should have been from the start. Slowly, day by day, he and Eleanor found themselves bridging the gap that once seemed unbridgeable. Sure, there were challenges. Catherine's vehement disapproval, the press sniffing for a scandal, and the complicated legalities of introducing a father to a child after 5 years. But overshadowing all the hurdles was the steadfast devotion Nicholas showed to Violet, and the undeniable spark still lingering between him and Eleanor. Their story was no longer about betrayal and heartbreak. It was evolving into a second chance, fragile, but fiercely fought for. One morning, as the sun rose over the harbour, Nicholas found Eleanor watching Violet build a sand castle. He joined her, gingerly slipping his hand into hers. She didn't pull away. They stood there in peaceful silence, the ocean breeze carrying away the echoes of the past. The future was unwritten, but they had hope, and that was enough to begin anew. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of heartbreak, betrayal, and ultimately rediscovered love. Nicholas and Eleanor's story reminds us that life can take unexpected turns, and that what seems lost forever may find a way to return stronger and braver. If you were moved by their trials and touched by their second chance, we invite you to keep the spirit of hope alive by supporting our channel. Please like this video, share it with friends who love a good romantic drama, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping tales filled with passion and redemption. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you heartfelt stories that captivate and inspire. Who knows, perhaps you too will find renewed courage in your own life's challenges. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next love-filled adventure.